Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Don Zavis, co-founder of the Tucson Paranormal Society. Want to welcome you to Inside Tucson Paranormal, the podcast that talks about all the amazing paranormal things that are happening in Tucson and the Southwest. And today we actually have a viewer mail question. So normally we have a guest-based format where we'll have an experience around, but this one was one that we hear with a certain degree of consistency. So the decision was made to have it be little old me and talk about what that is. And that the question that came up, and again, one that we have with a certain degree of consistency, is in ghost investigations. This particular one basically said, I'm interested in getting involved in ghost investigations. I don't have much money. I see a lot of very sophisticated and expensive equipment that's used on television. What do I really, really need to do it and get started in the most economical way possible? So thank you so much. It came in. I don't want to share the name of the person that inquired on that because they hadn't cleared us to do that. But certainly, that being said, it's a great place to start. I think, interestingly enough, although there are tons of very sophisticated equipment that it is available and it can be quite expensive, you'll find that even in the highest end television shows that you'll see on TV that do ghost investigation generally use most frequently a couple very, very simple devices that you can get in many cases for less than $100. And you could, in many cases, buy them virtually anywhere from, Walmart, Home Depots, Amazon, pretty much all of the standard places coming up. So I kind of call them the big three. So, I actually use the words DEF to be indicative of what I think the big three is. DEF. D standing for digital voice recorder. So you've seen, obviously, all of the major shows have these little handheld devices, these digital voice recorders. The plan is it to catch EVPs, which is electronic voice phenomenon. So without getting too much into the technical world of what that is and why that is, it is believed amongst researchers that ghosts or spirits or multidimensional beings, you pick whatever you want, unfortunately are not able to communicate in a range that the average human being is able to. And we talk about infrasound, and we talk infrasound. We talk about very high frequency sounds. It's almost kind of like that dog whistle, right? It's so high pitched that humans can't hear it, but dogs can. However, your digital voice recorder, and when I say inexpensive, you can literally get them on Amazon for between $20 and $30. And I've used a variety of them and really haven't found a tremendous amount of difference in terms of the quality because they basically all work under the exact same technology, right? They use similar types of chips. They tend to have very small speakers. So one of the things I always caution people is don't assume that you don't hear something clear through the little speakers. Therefore, there's nothing legitimate there or recognizable there. I always encourage you to get it through a much larger set of speakers through your computer, laptop, something like that has a much more elevated ability to reproduce sound in their speaker system. So back into it. If there are some things that I do look for, I think the first thing that I would say is size. I tend to like something relatively small. So if you're looking for a digital voice recorder, number one, you want to find something, again, $20 to $30. There are tons and tons and tons of them out there. Normally, the technical parts of it are about the same. They all have about the same memory, about the same capacity, about the same battery life, because this is a rechargeable battery that's internal on the unit. So in terms of what it is, again, $20 to $30 is really going to be tops to get something good. What I find more times than not is either the lack of preparedness or the lack of consistency in its utilization. So let me give you an example. We find that these types of things, people will charge them up and then set them down for 3 weeks and then pick them up on investigation and find that there's virtually no battery left. For some reason, digital recorders, in my experience, it just kind of leak their battery charge over time. That's why I always suggest a fresh charge up to 100%, generally within 24 to 48 hours of your investigation. That's number one. Most of them have a very simple cord configuration. It's generally a mini USB that goes into a full-size USB that connects into your computer. And most computers have either software that is recognized as it's put in, or again, there is some very simple software that's readily available for little or no cost that will, really help you in the editing desk part of it. So the second thing is be an expert on it. That was the one thing that I find is that most people buy equipment, especially technical equipment, take it out and never read about it, never look into it, never fully understand how it works, what the functions are. They maybe look at the quick start guide and it says here's how you turn it on, here's how you turn it off, here's how you do this. But because this is such a pivotal aspect, and again, if you want to see how important it is, again, go to any one of the national ghost investigation shows. And this is, in many cases, their go-to. It's a simple EVP. It is a very inexpensive. It's not like a $500-600 Ovilus or very expensive, say a sweeping device or ghost box or something like that, spirit box that sweeps through the different radio frequencies. This is very simple. Probably about the size of a cigarette lighter, depending on which one. The old Bic style holds a good battery life, and you can get a relatively good. What I suggest is, if you want better answers to your questions, ask better questions. And what we find is that, and again, and I'm casting no aspersions against the national shows, but a lot of times the questioning is very, very generic, right? Is there anyone here with us? And what I find is that the barrage of questions tends to be, far too quick. So instead of saying, "Is anyone here with us?" I would generally like to say, "Is anyone here with us that is associated with this site?" Because we believe, as in most investigators, that spirits are transient. They can come into and out of, although there may be some that kind of cohabitate in a certain location identified as a haunting. But for the most part, there isn't that, they can only be these people. So I generally like to have a better question. Are you associated with this site? Were you, did you live here in the past? And then give it ample time. I find so many times someone will ask a question and they'll wait 5 seconds, and the next thing you know, they're asking it again. Well, I think of myself in just conversation. If somebody asks me a question, it may take me all of 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds, just to come up with an answer, right? If it's a much more specific question, again, and that's why we say, if you want better answers, ask better questions. You're going to want to be able to ask a question, probably 5 or 6 questions, almost boilerplate. So you want to ask them consistently, right? You want to ask the same kind of question. Are you associated with the site? Did you ever live on the premise if it happens to be a home or something of that nature, right? You want to have your go-to questions. And what I find is that the repetition of it, the ability to do it over and over and over and over again, tends to make it much easier to understand, right? It's not like you're constantly searching for questions. It's almost like in my day job, I'm a sales trainer. And I tell people all the time, it's that open-ended question versus close. Is anyone here with us? Well, that can be answered with a yes, right? But if you ask another question, even to a potentially spirit, dimensional being, whatever you want to say, you want to ask a question where just a single word, yes or no, probably isn't appropriate. It needs to have something else. Again, I believe that these are just people. They're just people, just like you and I. They happen to be in a different plane of existence. So if you were a happy and communicated person in life, I believe you're going to be a happy, communicated person in death. So you're going to want to have your digital recorder kind of as your go-to. You may want to have, during an investigation, you may want to have the ability to charge it up. So most people tend to take breaks, 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. So if you're investigating for a couple hours, You might investigate for 50 minutes and then for 10 minutes, sit down, have a cup of coffee, chat, discuss the experience. It's very easy to pop it into a laptop or pop the cable into a laptop, charge it up, just kind of, top it off for you when you're going to be in that situation. So your digital recorder is your absolute initial go-to when you're looking at, again, in terms of cost effectiveness, anywhere between $20 and $30. But you really want to be an expert at it, because even though it's small and even though it doesn't have enormous amounts of features, you really want to be an expert on the features that it does have. Now, the next one, so D of my DEF, D is for digital voice recorder. E, for those that are familiar with investigation, EMF meter. And an EMF meter is just a very simple piece of technology. It originally, much like a digital voice recorder, was really never made for paranormal investigations. It was actually made for electricians. And the idea was EMF, right, electromagnetic frequency, is the frequency that current, when running in a line, will disrupt. So the idea was is that if you were unsure of whether or not you had cut the power, so if you were an electrician, you're going to put in a new plug. You're not sure if the power's cut to the plug. Did somebody throw the breaker properly? Just as an additional amount of protection, you would have an EMF meter. You would turn it on. You would put it then next to a pipe, a plug, something that recognizes current. But the interesting thing about current, right, is it's static in its location. So the current, the electrical current running through a wire or into a plug doesn't extend far beyond that plug. So you'll be able to see if and again, we're talking about a $20 or $30 item. Nice thing about EMF meters is historically they have other features as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of the EMF, when you actually get it next to an active plug, you'll see it you'll see it, and there's all kinds of different, but milligauss is kind of the go-to in terms of the increments that it actually has. And as you get closer to an active plug or a light switch or anything that has current, you'll see it go up. But as you move it away, you'll see it go down. So the current itself is very static, right? It moves in its location, but it doesn't extend far beyond its location. And that's why an EMF meter is such a wonderful tool, because if you lay it down on a table and it gets a 0 reading, and then for some reason it gets a read. Now, historically, it doesn't pick up people, right? It doesn't, even though we are electric in our function, it really doesn't. If you put your hand in front of it, it doesn't pick up your electrical impulses because it's really too small for this particular type of device to do. But that's why I think it's so valuable as a location device, because if you're doing an investigation, you want to be able to put it on a table. You want to be able to get a kind of a bench line 0 reading. And if you ask whatever you perceive to be there to come to this device, sometimes they'll have lights on it. There are ways that even for someone who might be hundreds of years old, and this type of device is absolutely foreign to them. There are aspects of the device, however, that are not. Lights, for example, right? You'll see some red and green lights on this. Would you please come towards that? As you get closer, you'll see some things. You'll see some letters pop up or numbers pop up, or in some way the device will react. Now, if you set it on a desk, it has 0. You're watching it. You ask for an interaction. Something potentially comes closer. The electronics recognize that. Well, that's good evidence. And again, we always say that evidence doesn't substantiate or it doesn't conclude or unconclude anything. It's just another part of the puzzle. It's another part of the building block. A lot of times, a lot of the EMF meters will also have the ability to recognize temperature. Kind of as an adjunct as well. So if you were looking for, again, if you were an electrician and you were looking for some kind of a heat source, maybe a hot spot in a wall, which if there was a problem with the current, if there was a broken wire, tends to heat up. That's why electrical fires are something. So we find that, again, in that electrical current world, temperature is representative of activity, right? So if there's a break in a line, it's going to reflect more temperature. Therefore, that's going to alert the electrician that maybe the damage that he's looking for is in the wall or maybe in the plug, or if he's running it along a piece of wiring, maybe there's some damage in the wiring that's going to be causing that. So, as a double duty item, your standard EMF also gives you the capacity, not all, but in some cases, to pick up temperature. So, again, if you have it sitting on a desk, and you're in a 72-degree room, unless there's something that reacts to it, something that approaches it, a cold spot, a draft, a warm spot for that matter, right? If you put your hand closer to it, it's going to recognize the heat of your palm. It's going to recognize it. If it's a very sensitive device, it's going to recognize it. But again, if you're sitting in a room, your body heat is, there's no air conditioning on. Maybe you're in an environment that doesn't even have power, right? A lot of abandoned buildings and a lot of places that are very desirable to investigate not only have no electricity, but they have no HVAC. And if you can recognize that you're not in a position where there may be some kind of some kind of a leakage, or you're going to get a breeze or airflow or something like that, and automatically now you get a 10-degree drop. Well, again, I'm not saying that that's a guarantee, but again, that's evidence. In some, bring in radiation. There are simple radiation devices that will talk about that. So a good EMF meter. Some people use a tri-field meter that recognizes multiple fields, hot and cold, and EMF and radiation. So these tri-field meters or these EMF meters, again, what I suggest is something that is easy to hold. I like something that is directional. So if it has, some of the meters are just square boxes, and the device that actually recognizes the activity is buried into the box. I tend to like something that has a more external sensor. They would have that, again, something that's very simple to slip into a pocket, something that's very simple to slip into things. Usually they're battery powered. So, of course, you're going to want to have an extra battery or two. Why? Well, because anyone who's been in any kind of investigations realizes that one of the hallmarks of activity, or the fact that you're making contact, is that in many cases, people believe, as I do as well, that these spirits, in an attempt to manifest, are going to look for whatever available power is there. So if you are in, again, our bodies right now are electrical. If your heart stops beating, they shock it into beating. Well, it makes sense. So maybe there's some component of that electrical as well. So you're going to want to keep at least a couple of extra batteries around. Now, again, if your battery drains right away, is that a guarantee? No. But is it at least something to look at and say that this might be a possibility? And our third in the F, so D for digital recorder, E for EMF meter, F stands for filming. And that's where a very, very simple video camera comes in. You can buy these, again, $20, $30, very inexpensive. The one that I like you can get from Walmart. It's just an import. It has a built-in battery to it, so it can be charged, again, through your computer, any one of a variety of different ways. Very simple cord configuration that enables you to kind of connect it up with most devices, DVRs and things. But it is digital. And the one part that I like more about digital than even actual photographs, and there's something to be said for both, is that in the photographic world, you have to snap the picture. So that means that, no matter what the circumstance, and we've all seen this, right? How come you can't, get a picture of a car accident as it happens, right? Well, because you're likely not holding the camera up, facing the intersection, right? When there's really nothing going on, at the if come that something might happen. But a digital recorder, you want to have that running constantly. From the moment that you get onto your investigation, and again, this is just my opinion, from the moment that you get into or onto your investigation, you're in business, right? You're making it happen. You want to be able to have everything done when you're looking at your meters. You want to make sure and again, this could be something very simple. It could be a GoPro attached to a vest. That's very popular. Sometimes a small handheld is good, because I find that, if you do hear a sound, you can generally, move your arm around quicker than in many cases you can, swing around to get your chest mounted GoPro to be able to see something. Something very simple, right? You can aim it. You could aim it at a co-investigator. You could aim it at another piece of equipment. You can aim it at a place that might be hard. So I've had situations where, if something happens directly above you, in order to have that chest mounted GoPro, you literally have to be laying on your back facing up, where a very simple, I encourage you to have some kind of zoom capacity, right? Which is kind of standard in most of these. You want to be able to have, so if you see something, even if it's across the room, you want to be able to zoom in. And some provide a level of night vision. That's a little bit more sophisticated, certainly more expensive. Is it great to have? Absolutely. The ability to see in the dark is fabulous, especially because a lot of what you do is in the dark. Interestingly enough, though, there's much evidence that says an investigation during the day is equally as viable as an investigation at night. There's nothing that says that they're more active at this point in time than that point in time. Again, I believe they're just people. If anything, we're probably more active during the day than we are in the evening. So maybe there's evidence that goes in both things, but you want to be able to have it. But the most important thing is, again, fully charged up, or the ability to charge it during the investigation. And you really, really want it to be clamped to your hand. And when I say clamped to your hand, you want it to be on and generally facing what you see. If you're looking in one direction and you're filming to the right, again, something might be happening to the right and you're not even looking at it, although most have a very small screen, right? But if you've got something happening in front of you, you want to be able to have that filmed. You want to be able to have that evidence. You want to be able to have that record of what you've experienced. And again, we don't, it's great to have evidence. To some people, no evidence is required. To other people, no evidence is enough. I kind of fall in the middle and say that, an experience is great, but a recorded experience or some kind of evidence experience is even better, because it takes out the question mark of whether or not, what your experience is real, or is it actually happening, or, is this something that we're doing? So, that's all of the things that we look for, um, that come into this in terms of the concept of the three things. Again, all three you can generally get for less than $100. Simple digital video, simple digital voice recording. Again, small, fits in your pocket. Charge it up, become an expert on it. Again, simple EMF meter. If it has the ability to recognize temperature, that's great. If it has the ability to recognize radiation or any other more, the tri-field meters that have more, that's wonderful as well. Those are certainly additional benefits that you can have. A simple, inexpensive, nowadays, because of, everybody has on their phone the ability to video. Digital video recorders have really, really come down in price. And again, we're talking maybe $30, maybe $40. So generally, for less than $100, you've really got a good setup. But I find that the best equipment, if utilized long, is really where it goes south. So again, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much for joining us on this kind of, tech bench version of Tucson, Inside Tucson Paranormal. Once again, I'm Don Zavis, one of the co-founders of the Tucson Paranormal Society, and I absolutely, wish that you continue on your track. And for us, we always, we're seeking to explain the unexplainable. So thank you so much, everybody. It's an absolute privilege for you for us to be able to do this. Hopefully you're going to join us on one of our investigations, one of our events. Thank you so much. Have a great Monday and a great week. Bye-bye.